right from the very beginning, we want to say that this vision belongs to God, and then also to acknowledge that we don't see the whole picture. In fact, the vision is unfolding, and the wonderful thing is that generally God's plan for us is bigger and higher and wider than what we've ever imagined. But in our church, you will find some pictures that our artists have drawn that really try to express visually what we feel in our heart and what we see for our future. The first picture that I want to describe is the picture of the three crosses, and that for us represents Christ and his magnificent work on the cross, and that which he has done in reconciling us back into an intimate relationship with God and friendship with God, and that we can come to God with a pure heart and clean hands is absolutely amazing. And so we want to say our vision is captivated by Jesus, and all that we do flows out of who he is and what he's done and what he calls us to do. And then one of our young artists has painted a picture of some young boys worshiping, that as a response to what Jesus has done, we respond in worship and adoration, and we surrender our lives and say, Lord, you are absolutely worthy. And so that which we see is a community whose eyes are fixed upon Jesus and who are worshiping and who delight to worship him. And we see that encompassing every aspect of our lives with regards to our marriages and our children and our work and our careers and at school, that every aspect is a response to who Jesus is. Another picture that is drawn is a picture of Jesus calling people to follow him. And so we are a church who believes and does picture calling many people to follow him. We are not a church that exists just for ourselves. In fact, quite the opposite. We exist to display God's glory and to call people to follow Jesus, not out of legalism or 100% we're just going to obey you, Jesus, but because we really do believe that Jesus is magnificent and really worth following, and that to follow Jesus and his ways is how we were created to live. And we see the broken and the oppressed and the imprisoned and those without hope and those with hard hearts, and indeed the entire community around us. We see their lives being changed as Jesus is proclaimed and lived out in various spheres, and we see people moving from following themselves to following him. The third picture that we see is a picture of hands joined together. It's a picture of a wheelbarrow and scales, and it really is our desire to see justice done. And part of our city and part of our community is that there's great injustice, and because of what Christ has done to us, and because we were poor and we were vulnerable and we were had no hope, and because of the work of Christ, he has changed our position, and we work for justice out of that motivation, that Christ has changed our position and seated us as sons and as princes with God. So we desire to serve our community in the same way, not just out of handouts or wanting to give token giving, but to really reposition people spiritually, economically, geographically. We love Psalm 113 that talks about that God raises the poor from the ash heap and seats them with princes, and that really would convey our heart. And so we see projects and lives and efforts that work for justice, and in so doing shout out that God is good. And another picture that was a vision of the work extending beyond ourselves. And part of our vision is to multiply influence, that we do trust that God would give us influence and beyond our current spheres where we operate. We trust for influence in government, in education, in sport, in the artistic area, in school, and wherever God would open doors, we're going to say, yes, Lord.